Okay, ready? Hi, everybody. We're getting started here in just a second. All right.
Recording in progress.
Hi, welcome everybody. We're so glad to be getting started tonight. We have a really content-heavy night for you, and I'm really excited about all the things that I get to share with you. Before we jump in, I have a quick announcement. For all of our current patients, we're offering a promo to help our small business to grow. So if you want to refer a friend to call in and sign up for a free consultation in the next week, for anyone who has a friend that signs up for our program, you and your friend will both receive a free TRX, which if you don't know what that is, ask Dr. Shill when you're in next. It's a really great exercise tool that can be taken anywhere, used with any workout of any part of your body at any level that you're at, and can progress with you. And a year-long membership to the TRX's video library, which has hundreds of different workouts for many different levels. So it's a great tool for muscle building, and it's portable. You can put it anywhere in your home. You can take it with you anywhere you go. It comes in a small bag, so you can pack it with you on vacation. It's easy to hang over your door frame. So anyway, if you haven't seen one and are interested, ask us next time you're in. We can show it to you in our ShillMed gym. And again, that will go for you and a friend that signs up for our program. It doesn't matter when the consultation is, but they have to book it by May 1st. So we encourage you to tell your friends about us and hopefully bring them along for the journey. So with that said, we're going to jump into tonight's content, which I'm so excited to share with you. It is all about the power of sleep. Now, I think we all understand that sleep is important, but I hope that by the end of tonight's webinar, you have a deeper understanding of why it's important for you and a better grasp on what you can change in your routine to make that happen. So to start out with, I'm going to just breeze through this. I'm going to give you like really, really short 10 or 15 seconds. Look at these 3 words. Okay, and with that, we're going to move on. We'll come back to that later. Here's our Did You Know for tonight. Did you know that 2/3 of Americans report getting less than the recommended 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night? 2/3. So that's saying, let's see, we have several of you on tonight that 2/3 of you are probably not getting the sleep that your body needs. That's really an overwhelming statistic. Good quality sleep is best achieved when cycling as close to the sun as possible. So that's our circadian rhythm, right? Our bodies are designed to sleep when it's dark and to be awake in the sunlight. Now, certainly there are night shifts and newborn babies and all kinds of reasons why we were also created to have to disrupt that cycle. But for the most part, if our goal can be to get as close to the sun cycle as possible, then we're going to do the best with our sleep. Now, every person's internal rhythm is going to be slightly different. We're talking about the built-in physiological rhythm that your body comes with, not your habits that you form, that built-in rhythm. And even within this idea of sleep while it's dark, awake in the sunlight, you're going to have a little bit of a different rhythm. So the recommendation then is to form habits that are consistent as much as possible so that your body can get used to following the same rhythm. Okay. So let's back up for a second and just think about the last night you remember getting just the most restful sleep. We all have that memory. Maybe it was when you were a kid, right? I actually have a picture. I didn't have time to find it for tonight, but I have a picture of me at about this age. And I remember saying to my mom, maybe as a teenager or a young adult, why can't I sleep like that now? Just that feeling of just this little body being snuggled into these big comfy quilts and pillows. So maybe it was back to your childhood, but even so as an adult, I know that there are nights when I look back and think, man, that felt so good to sleep that hard. Maybe after a really difficult day of manual labor, maybe on Benadryl. Sometimes those are my best night's sleeps. But when was the last time you just felt so good getting a good night's sleep? And how long has it been? And how often do you feel like that happens for you? I got to apologize in advance. I did add a few slides with a few questions tonight. So if you're looking at your workbooks, there's a few of these questions that aren't in there. You can use the notes section for that. And I plan for next year for the update to add a few more of these in. How often do you feel like you wake up feeling rested? And I guess this is the most important one I want you to think about going into tonight. How do you feel about sleep? Is it a positive experience or is it one that you dread? Because really, sleep is a gift, right? It's a renewal for our body. And if it's going well for us, then it's something we look forward to and feel good about. And if we're struggling with our sleep, first of all, there's no shame in that. This is something that we can address and help with. But is it something that you've started to dread because it's such a miserable experience? Okay, so think about that as we move forward. I'm going to give you a quick little quiz. Most of these are corresponding to questions in your workbook. A few of them you might have to write in if you want to take notes. Don't feel like you have to fill in every single line, just kind of write things as they come to you. Do you consistently get 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night? And again, that's not going to be every night, but on average, are you getting that much? How many hours do you spend in bed per night? Not necessarily sleeping, but how many hours are you spending in your bed? Now think back to if these two questions match each other. How many hours of sleep are you getting? How many hours are you spending in bed? Because we're going to talk for a second about the difference between quantity of sleep and quality of sleep, right? You may be in bed for the right amount of time, but you might not be getting that sleep that you need. Okay. How long does it take you to fall asleep at night? Is that where your struggle is? Do you lie in bed wide awake, your mind racing, maybe your chronic pain issues flaring up? So think about that. Maybe that's where the struggle lies. How many times per night on average is your sleep interrupted? Now, that could be from external factors, like if you have small children or pets or husband that snores or wife that snores. It could be just physiological problems. You're waking up in pain, you're tossing and turning a lot, you have sleep apnea. But how many times is that getting interrupted? And then when your sleep is interrupted, do you go right back to sleep? Or are you like, oh, great, I'm up. Now I'm going to take a half an hour to an hour to get back to sleep. Might as well get up and do chores at 2 a.m, right? Um, okay. And then I know we're moving through these pretty quick, so sorry about that. How consistent is your sleep schedule? Okay, so this could range anywhere from you're so consistent, and I know people like this, that they will sacrifice everything to make sure that their sleep is on track, right? It is time for bed. It doesn't matter if it's New Year's Eve. It doesn't matter if I'm, partying with friends. It doesn't matter if I haven't seen somebody in 10 years and they just came over 5 minutes ago. I'm going to bed. That's just how it is, all the way to the extreme of I just go to bed when it happens and I don't have any kind of routine, right? So most of us are probably somewhere in the middle of that. Okay, and then I think this is what we're really going to explore tonight. What do you perceive as your biggest barrier to good sleep? Now, we're going to dive into this a little bit more, but take just a second and see if you can identify it right off the bat. And then at the end, we're going to circle back and see if it's changed as we've kind of learned about this a little bit more. Maybe you've changed your mind about what your biggest barrier is. So jot it down. If you already have something fresh in your head. If you don't, then follow along with me and let's see if we can figure it out. So we're going to break this down a little bit further. We talked for a second before about the difference between quantity of sleep versus quality of sleep, right? So if we're talking quantity, we're talking about getting enough hours in, right? Are you getting in bed? Are you sleeping 10 p.m. to 6 a.m.? Most of us are not exactly on that schedule, but are you in bed sleeping during those hours, right? Hopefully those hours come together, right? And are we in sync with our circadian rhythm? Quality sleep, we might be in bed for 12 hours, but we might not actually be sleeping for a lot of that. And when we are sleeping, maybe we're only surface sleeping. We're not getting into that deep restorative sleep that's so important. Now, certainly most of us don't even know if, what levels of sleep we're on outside of how we feel when we wake up, unless we have a sleep monitor or we've done sleep studies. But I think generally you can kind of tell if you've gotten that restorative sleep in the way that you feel in the morning and throughout your day. So with that in mind, let's kind of break that down even further. Now, this is a very oversimplified version of this. So recognize this is not this simple, but this just kind of gives us an idea to start exploring what our main sleep issues are, right? If we're looking at quantity, that a lot of times has to do with our schedules, our beliefs or our thought processes around sleep, the amount of discipline that we have with our schedule and the habits that we've formed, right? If we're just struggling with quantity, getting 5 or 6 hours of sleep at night, that generally has to do with our habits, right? If we're talking quality, it a lot of times has a lot more health implications. And that could be both physical and mental health barriers, right? So let's break that down one more step now and talk about barriers to success within those categories. So if our problem is quantity, we're looking at these 4 categories that I just mentioned. And again, this is very oversimplified. I'm sure you can think of more, and there's some overlap here too, right? Okay, so schedules, right? This is a big one for me and for a lot of us that are in this like phase of life where we're just running a million different directions, right? We've got work commitments, community or church commitments, family commitments, home responsibilities, and we just feel like we can't pack it all into one day. And sleep is a lot of the times the priority that gets thrown out. Okay. Maybe our belief system. And I think this sounds funny until you think about how often have you heard people use these phrases, joking, but it's also justification for their habits, right? Sleep is for the weak. I'll sleep when I'm dead. Maybe you just have a fear of missing out. I mean, how many of us in college were like that? I was definitely like that. You know, I'd rather go without huge amounts of sleep than ever miss a party, right? And maybe it's a badge of honor, right? How often do we complain about it almost in a bragging sense? Like, oh, got 3 hours of sleep last night. Like it's almost something to be proud of. Like, look at me, I'm functioning on very little sleep. Okay. So, I mean, it seems funny that beliefs can get in the way, but really, how much of what's going on mentally is feeding some of these habits that are causing us not to sleep as much as we need. Okay, so then we look into habits, and I think it's an important point to make that bad habits or bad habits, whatever we want to call them, habits that are affecting us negatively, often stem from an unmet need. So when we try to change our habits, we have to address those unmet needs in order to make those shifts. Because if we're just cutting out these unmet needs, then they're going to catch up with us. And we're going to either seek them out in other habits that may or may not be good for us, or we're going to revert back to the old habits because we have this need that has been unmet. So some examples of that, right? This is another big one for me. You need time at night to decompress and to process the day and to just kind of let your brain relax before you have to start all over and do it again. As much as as much as I enjoy my life, I still need that decompression time at the end of the day. And so if I try to say, okay, the second my kids are in bed, I hit the pillow and I'm sleeping, that will only work for so long for me because I'm not addressing this need that I have. Now, can I address that need in another way? Absolutely. But we have to address the need as we shift the habit. So, other habits, maybe connecting with people like your spouse. Maybe that's the only time you can connect with a spouse or children or friends. Back to this college example, right? Maybe it's the relaxing or unwinding. Maybe, and this is not me, I'll tell you, I admire people that are like this, but I have friends that say, well, 11 o'clock at night is the only time I can get any projects done or cleaning done. And I'm like, I will never clean at 11 o'clock at night. That is my time to just not have any responsibilities for a second, right? But maybe that's an unmet need. Like you're going to have to find other time for that in order to shift that habit, right? And then we can talk about discipline, which honestly, a lot of times also comes from an unmet need. Are you lacking discipline because you're exhausted? Are you lacking discipline because you're stretched too thin in other areas of life? Your stress is too high? Or is it just a lack of skills that you've developed? And that's okay. We are all at different levels of developing skills in different areas of our lives. So if we can address, okay, this is just a skill I haven't developed yet, then it's something we can work on, or address the unmet need, or both. Okay, so that's kind of an overview of what it looks like if it's a quantity problem, right? What if the problem is quality? What if you're struggling to stay asleep? What if you're not getting restful sleep? Well, again, oversimplified here, but a lot of times this stems from physical health and mental health issues, right? So if it's physical health, what are the physical health things that cause us to get poor sleep? Sleep apnea is a big one. Poor circulation, even just sometimes having extra weight on you so that when you lay on certain sides of your body, it cuts off circulation and then things, your arm gets numb and then you have to shift and then you're tossing and turning more. Weight is a big barrier to good sleep. And so the good news is you're here working with us. And I can almost promise you that as your weight drops, your sleep is going to improve. So just being here studying with us is going to improve your sleep. Positional breathing difficulties, that kind of is the same as sleep apnea in a lot of ways. Positional comfort, tossing and turning, GI issues, frequent urination, all of those things are physical health issues that can contribute to interrupted sleep. Mental health, we've all been there, right? Something's straining you, stressing you on your mind. It's hard to stay asleep. You wake up in the middle of the night worried about things and can't get back to sleep. Stress can contribute to poor sleep, overwhelm, depression. Maybe you're sleeping a lot during the day, so you're not getting restful sleep at night. It's throwing off your circadian rhythm, and just the brain clutter, right? It's hard to calm your brain down enough to let it rest. So for both of these things, one of the things that can help, and this is what we're going to do tonight, is we can address the lack of education surrounding the effects of chronic sleep deprivation. So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to run you pretty quickly through some pretty cool statistics about what happens inside your body when you're not sleeping enough. And that can serve as motivation to start going back and addressing some of these quality and quantity problems to get the sleep that your body needs. So finish this sentence. When I don't get enough sleep, I am, go ahead, take a second and fill in the blank. And let me just comment, Julie, yes, I should have said hormonal changes are a big deal with sleep. So thank you for adding that. That should definitely, I'm going to add that to the slide for next time. That's definitely an issue. Okay, cranky, anxious, cranky, tired, more prone to cravings. We're going to address all of that. A sloth. I have a 12-year-old who loves sloths. I wish she was here to see that. That's perfect. A space. Yeah. So mentally, right? It's harder to focus. Cranky. Yes. Great answers. Okay. So let's just, before we dive into this, make the following 2 points. Number one, recognize that sleep deprivation is a chronic condition that, you stay up till midnight on New Year's Eve. This is not going to throw off your cortisol levels long term. This is a chronic problem. So think of this in terms of you have time to fix this, and it doesn't always have to be perfect. And then again, recognizing that every person's body has different needs and different thresholds. So these are general guidelines that are going to kind of help guide us. So let's look at what sleep deprivation looks like on the inside. In your workbooks, there is a section for you to it's not a huge section, but you can write in those workbooks which pieces of this kind of resonate with you. So write down the things as they come to your mind. Don't feel like you have to take notes on every single one of these things as we go, but just write down the things that are really interesting to you. Okay. So let's talk about sleep and restorative functions. Did you know that when you're not getting enough sleep, you have impaired protein synthesis in your body that can affect everything from muscle building to healing to a million other things? The protein synthesis in your body is impaired when you're not sleeping enough, because that sleep brings restoration in every system of your body. So wound healing, right? Tissue repair. And this actually includes skin. I learned this today when I was researching it a little bit. As we age, the collagen loss in our skin and the breakdowns and all of that kind of stuff, the tissue repair that keeps our skin looking fresh and young, that happens while we sleep. It inhibits muscle growth. So this is an example of, the hard work that you're doing with us with fat loss and muscle growth. We're actually fighting against that if we're not getting enough sleep. Neuron restoration, which can affect memory retention and judgment, especially as you get older. And then inhibited organ restoration. So all of the organs in your body, your brain, your heart, your lungs, your liver, your stomach, all of these things, your body is constantly healing and restoring in your sleep. And that's why sleep is such an important part of good health. Okay, let's look at metabolic disorders. Did you know your cortisol levels are higher in your body when you're not getting enough sleep? So think about it. That makes sense. We're not just cranky because we're tired. We're also cranky because our stress hormones are up. Isn't that interesting? And so giving your body restful sleep can actually lower the hormones that cause stress. But cortisol does more than just cause stress. It also decreases our immunity, right? So again, when you're not getting enough sleep, what happens? We usually get sick. That's because it suppresses our immune system. Cortisol does, right? And cortisol also helps with collagen. And so when you have higher, sorry, I said that the opposite. When you have higher cortisol levels, you have more collagen breakdown. So when we talk about beauty sleep, that's actually a real thing. You're breaking down the collagen that's causing your skin to have that youthful glow. You're getting more wrinkles, more bags under your eyes, all of those things. Collagen is actually linked to cortisol, which I did not know. For you people that have diabetes, are concerned about diabetes, have pre-diabetes, have a family history of diabetes, our glucose levels and our glucose consistency is more all over the place. It goes up. Our insulin sensitivity is lower. And so we have an increased risk and severity of diabetes without sleep. Now, certainly sleep is not going to cure your already existing diabetes. We have all kinds of more advanced techniques to deal with that. But even if you have diabetes, your insulin sensitivity is going to be lower and your glucose levels are going to be higher with lack of sleep. Okay, let's talk about cardiac health. We have higher blood pressure, especially at nighttime. Did you know that sleep can actually cause your lack of sleep can cause your blood pressure to elevate? We have decreased stamina and cardiovascular recovery time, which is going to make workouts more difficult, not just because you're tired, but because your cardiovascular abilities are down. More difficult recoveries from illness and injury. That makes sense, right? We are going to have increased inflammation in our body. I actually feel like I've felt that lately. I have not had great sleep in the last week or two, and I feel like it makes a difference. Just the way you feel, stomach aches and all kinds of things increase with a lack of sleep. Increased risk of heart attack, increased risk of heart disease and heart-related death. And there are some pretty significant statistics about heart-related death and disease as linked to with sleep deprivation. It's really interesting. Increase of oxygen deprivation in the cells. So really on a cellular level, we're seeing big disadvantages to not getting enough sleep. Isn't that interesting? Okay, just a quick breeze through cancer. Who would have thought that sleep actually helps prevent cancer? But it does. So sleep deprivation actually hinders your DNA repair and remodeling. And it depresses the cancer fighting cells in your body and increases the cancer stimulating cells. Now, again, sleep is not the cure for all cancer. That's not what I'm saying. But isn't it interesting that the cells in your body that both fight and stimulate cancer are affected by sleep? It also, at the same time, suppresses your immune system and your melatonin production. It causes dysfunction to your gene writing, and it is specifically correlated with the following cancers: breast, endometrial, prostate, colorectal, and acute myeloid leukemia. So again, these are associations, not direct correlations, but it does have an effect based on a lot of medical studies. So the immune system we've kind of touched on already with the cortisol levels, but you have lower resistance to illness because of the cortisol levels. You have an increase in pro-inflammatory cells in your body, which is what we just talked about with it increasing inflammation. You have an increased risk of pneumonia, common cold, and flu. You have a decreased effectiveness of vaccinations. Can you believe that? And an increased presentation of allergies. So the cells in your body, basically, you got to think of it this way. This is a very simplified version of a way to look at it. Your body takes the time you are asleep to build up its resources and its reserves and to decrease the negative things that come up in your body, the cells that are fighting the good parts of your body, all of the things that are not supposed to be there. All of this happens while you sleep. It's like you go to sleep and your body can then say, okay, let's fix everything. Let's revamp everything. Let's freshen up everything. And when you don't get enough sleep, your body doesn't have a chance to do that. Okay. Fluid status. This is kind of one we don't really think about very often, right? Sleep deprivation increases your fluid retention. So that can actually affect your core temperature. We're going to talk about that here in a few minutes. Your core temperature affects your circadian rhythm. And so it's just kind of this vicious cycle, right? So let's see. It also can stimulate your body's fight or flight response, which is then linked to higher stress levels as well. It can increase swelling in your body, and it can activate, again, cortisol, our best friend, which I should take note. We're not talking about this tonight, but cortisol plays an important part in your body as well. It's not just something negative. We need our cortisol, but when we're not getting that restorative sleep, that cortisol works against us instead of for us. Okay, this one is really fascinating. Okay, we just kind of talked about hormones. Let's talk for a second about the hormones that actually contribute to our weight loss or inability to lose weight. So there are two main hormones that contribute to our appetite. leptin, which suppresses our appetite, and ghrelin, which stimulates our appetite. So when we're sleep deprived, again, we kind of think of it in terms of, okay, I'm just tired. And when I'm tired, I don't have enough emotional control. And then when I don't have enough emotional control, I make choices with food that I don't want to make, right? I mean, that certainly is true the later in the evening it gets when we're just tired and our defenses are down. And that is part of it. But underlying that, you need to understand that when you're not sleeping enough, your body is not producing enough leptin and it is producing an abundance of ghrelin. So you're actually not getting the appetite suppressant and you're getting the appetite stimulant. Does that make sense? So that's part of why sleep is so important in weight loss. All right, let's keep going. Now, we would be remiss to not talk for a second about mood and cognitive disorders, right? We know that we're cranky when we don't get enough sleep, but it also correlates with increased complications in major depression. It gives you an increased risk of dementia, suicidal thoughts, ideations, attempts, bipolar disorder, seasonal affective disorder, premenstrual syndrome, post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, and long-term effects of dramatic brain injury. Sorry. I think that's supposed to be traumatic brain injury. So this goes without saying, I think, but any mental health issue that we are dealing with is going to be exacerbated and enhanced with a lack of sleep. Kind of just building off of that, we're also going to struggle with memory. This is actually particularly true for my husband. He says this all the time. He says, if I don't get enough sleep, I can't remember anything. Maybe you can relate to that. That's not so much something that I struggle with. I struggle with plenty of these other ones. But for him specifically, he says his memory really struggles when he hasn't gotten enough sleep. Anxiety extinguishment ability. I thought that was interesting. You're going to have most of this we've kind of already talked about, but look at impaired moral judgment. Isn't that an interesting one? Misinterpretation of social cues. Are you more likely to get offended when you haven't gotten enough sleep? You've got decreased cognitive processing speed. I could tell you some good stories about family members and, fender benders when they haven't gotten enough sleep. Diminished fear extinguishing. Okay. Do you just feel more afraid when you're all of these things? It's harder to grasp control of our emotions when we're sleep deprived, right? And increased pain sensitivity. That's a really interesting one. Okay. One more thing I want to touch on. I've mentioned this to anybody that's come into the clinic when I've been there. I know Dr. Shill talks about it too, but if you look on your in-body scans, that section that says basal metabolic rate, and we always say that's one of our favorite parts because those are the calories that you burn in your sleep. And if you look at that number, it is 2 or 3 times the amount of calories that you can burn when you're up walking around and moving, even when you're exercising. We're looking at a couple hundred calories that you burn in a really intense workout most of the time. And the number that you burn when you're just dead asleep, lying in your bed, is double or triple that number for most people. And so that can give you a really good indication of how important sleep is when it comes to weight loss, right? And in order to take advantage of that number, you've got to get good restful sleep and you've got to get enough of it. So let's take this one step farther before we move on. Think about what this looks like for you. Okay. So if we're talking about decreased learning and memory, how does that affect your job, your children's needs, your responsibilities? Maybe if you don't have children or if you don't have children at home, the needs of anyone that depends on you, whether it's at work or in your community. Decreased anxiety extinguishment. Okay. So how often do you live with anxiety versus feel crippled by it? Your ability to acquire new information and retain it. How does that affect your job or school if you're in school? Increased emotional distress, impaired moral judgment. Think of some of your greatest temptations. It could be food, it could be something totally different. What are the consequences of giving into those temptations? And how could adequate sleep help you fight those temptations, right? Misinterpretation of social cues. How is this affecting your relationships? Decreased alertness and cognitive functioning. That could be car accidents or any number of things that maybe could be really critical. We've talked about diminished fear extinguishing. What about pain sensitivity? Where are you feeling pain? And could more sleep help you to deal with that? And then we've already talked about weight loss. Are your sleep habits thwarting the efforts that you're making during the day? Okay. Okay. So do you remember the three words that we flashed on the screen at the very beginning? If you do, well, actually take 30 seconds before you type them in. But I just want to see if you can remember them. Or if you remember one, which one do you remember? Pretty good. Some of you got it. Okay. I'm impressed because I couldn't remember them the first time I did this. So here's the question. Could you remember the first one you saw, or was it something different? A lot of you who didn't remember all of them said grief, either first or as one of them. And so here's a study from 2006 from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. And what they found was that sleep deprived subjects were more likely to retain the words that were emotional, both positive and negative, but we're also more likely to view neutral statements negatively. So what does this teach us? That our brains gravitate more towards the negative when we're sleep deprived. Isn't that interesting? So kind of consider that in the context of everything that we've just discussed. Okay, so we're going to wrap up tonight in the next couple, maybe 10 minutes with what we can do about it. So if you're feeling overwhelmed at this point, like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that it was wreaking this kind of havoc on my body, but I have no idea how to change what's going on. Maybe you just feel helpless. Maybe there's a lot of physical or mental stuff going on that's causing you to not get quality sleep and you want to change it, but you don't know how. So let's see if we can give you some suggestions tonight as a place to start. And I'd love to hear from you at the end or in the future if any of this helped. So let's talk about sleep hygiene for a minute. And I just want to add really quick here that I was listening to a podcast this week about parenting, actually. And they were actually talking about how to plan as a family. And, that particular thing is not what we're talking about tonight. But the point that I wanted to make that I really liked was if you set a plan in place and you follow it 3 days out of 7, that's not a failure because you still followed it 3 days out of 7. And I think the same is true here. Oftentimes we think that this is only going to be effective if we can hit it at 100%. And the truth is when we're making changes in our lives, that's just not realistic most of the time. And so if we can make small changes and be as consistent as possible and then continue to make more small changes, then we're winning because we're slowly moving consistently towards better health. And so think of it in those terms and not in an all or nothing mentality. All right, so sleep hygiene, there's things you can do during the day, there's things that you can do to your environment, and then there's things that you can do during the night to improve your sleep. So we're going to start with during the day because kind of like everything, planning ahead and starting early is actually the best way to succeed. So another one that I've been listening to a lot lately that I wanted to share that I love is that talking about raising children. I've heard over and over and over again this week in these different ones that I've listened to, these different podcasts that I've listened to, that starting your day strong makes such a difference for the rest of your day. And I think the same is true here with preparing for sleep. If you start your day with early morning sunlight, then that's helping set your circadian rhythm in the right direction. If you are getting adequate hydration throughout your day, that can help your circadian rhythm and your body prepare to be awake during the day and then sleeping at night. One study that I read this week was actually suggesting that one of the best ways to start your day is to start just by hydrating. I thought that was really interesting. I think also screens can be a big culprit in poor sleep. And if we start our day again with no screens, I've heard that over and over again lately too. Just start your day with an hour with no screens and set your brain up to not be doing that dopamine seeking all day long. That's powerful, right? And then by the time we get to bed, our brains are set in this place, a different place, that they're ready to kind of get into this rhythm of sleep. And because we've started our day without that disruption that's so common now in our time of screens, right? Okay, plant-based diets. Again, this doesn't have to mean that you're vegetarian or vegan, but if you're trying to eat mostly whole foods, there was one study that showed that on average, 48 minutes of extra sleep per night for those who are on a plant-based diet. So the more we can incorporate whole foods into our diet can really affect our sleep. Again, with the schedule, right? If we can stay mostly on a similar schedule, that can make a big difference. Avoid long naps. I wouldn't say any naps. Sometimes naps can be really beneficial, but I think um, if you're finding that the days you take naps, you really struggle with sleep, then you can either adjust on timing, maybe a shorter nap, or try taking out the naps altogether and see if that makes a difference. Because a nap that takes away from your sleep is actually not going to benefit you. You're just going to be chasing sleep, right? Over and over again. Um, Not exercising 3 hours before bedtime. That's going to wake you up and get your blood pumping and activate your fight or flight responses, and that'll make it harder to settle down. Anybody who has ever had small children knows the detrimental effects of wrestling right before bed, right? That takes another, for my kids, 2 to 3 hours to settle down after that sometimes. Avoiding fluids after 8 p.m. If you're really struggling with getting up a lot at night, maybe 6 p.m. would be better for you. And then let's look at the mental health side of things, right? Can you simplify your day? Can you eliminate stressors? Can you adjust your schedule? Most of you right now are saying, yeah, right. Wouldn't that be nice? But I would like to suggest that most of us feel more victimized than we need to. Usually, if we'll take an honest look, really wanting to eliminate stressors, we'll find places where we can do it if we're being honest with ourselves. Okay, so take a second and write down in your notebooks what spoke to you there. Probably there were a few things that you're like, there's no way I'm doing that right now. And there were probably one or two things that you thought, yeah, I can do that. And that made you a little bit excited. Like, let's try that and see if it makes a difference. It could be as simple as changing the time of day that you drink water, right? But write down one thing that you feel like you could change to improve your daytime routine. Okay, so now let's talk about sleep hygiene. We get to the point where we're getting ready for sleep and we need to prepare our environment. The environment that we set up for ourselves can make a big difference on both sleep initiation, which is our ability to fall asleep, and sleep fragmentation, which is how many times we're waking up in the middle of the night. And the third thing we're going to talk about after this is what to do if you're waking up in the middle of the night. So let's talk about sleep initiation with sleep hygiene first, for preparing our environment. Sorry, that's what I meant to say. Okay, so some of these might be a monetary investment, and if you're really struggling with sleep initiation, that it might be worth a little bit of money to invest in. More comfortable bedding. Are your pillows lumpy and uncomfortable? I actually heard in the last couple of weeks about something I'd never heard of called grounding sheets. I've never tried them, so I can't endorse them, but the idea is that they are made out of some kind of earthy material. You should Google it because I can't endorse it or anything, but it supposedly kind of helps with your electrons and helps kind of calm your body. Who knows? It might be a total hoax, but I kind of was interested and thought, oh man, that would be kind of fun to try to see if it made a difference. People were talking about how it decreased their chronic pain, made them wake up feeling more restful. So just kind of throwing that out there as far as investments go. You know, sometimes we suffer and suffer and suffer through terrible mattresses when it really would be worth the investment to our health. If you think back, if you're going to spend a couple $100 on a mattress, that feels like a waste of money until you consider all of the health benefits to getting better sleep, right? And then it might be worth the investment in your health. Adjust your room temperature. Those of you who like it to be warm, we suggest extra quilts, but keeping the room temperature cool. Lots of studies show that, in the 60s is where you want your sleeping temperature to be, low 60s. If, I personally like to have a little bit of light when I sleep, but it doesn't bother me. But if you're struggling to sleep, then making it really dark in your room could really help. And then if you are distracted by noise, look into noise machines, earplugs, fans, noise canceling, anything. So also consider moving pets or children out of your bed. That's kind of a sore subject at our house because I can sleep through children in the bed and my husband can't, and he gets kicked all night and ends up moving to the couch. But children or dogs or cats in bed can sometimes disrupt sleep. And if that's the case for you, then consider changing the habits there maybe. And then moving screens outside of your bedroom is always a good suggestion. So what is one change that you're willing and able to make to your sleep environment that you think might work for you? Maybe not all these suggestions would work for you, but there's probably one there that might work for you. So think about that for just a second. Write that down. Because we have such heavy content, I'm going to keep moving, but you can take a few minutes at the end of this webinar too and kind of go back and think through what some of these things are. But also, as I'm talking through them, make sure you're writing them down as well, if you want to remember them, or you can always screenshot if you want to go back to a slide and review it later. Okay, so before you go to bed, so we talked about the environment. Now we're going to talk about before bed. Try to have the consistent bedtime. If you're struggling to go to sleep, avoid technology for 1 hour before bed. Try not taking your phone into your room at all. If you use it for an alarm clock, either buy an alarm clock or something that we do sometimes. Our laundry room is right outside of our bedroom. And so sometimes we'll plug it in the laundry room so that we're not bringing it into the bedroom, but we can still hear the alarm in the morning. And it also forces you to get out of bed and not just hit snooze on your bedside table, right? Relaxation techniques are great, especially if you're struggling with anxiety or stress. Yoga, meditation. Meditation sounds so hokey until you try it. If you are one of those people that is like, that is way too granola for me, I still encourage you to try it, because until I tried it, I kind of thought it was a little granola, and now I love it. It is such a powerful and impactful way to clear your head, and it doesn't have to be a huge time investment. I have an app that I like to use. I think it's called Aura. And it's pretty inexpensive. And it's like I can do 3-minute meditations anytime that I want. Most of the time, I'll try to do them first thing in the morning to just kind of get my mindset in the right place. Sometimes I'll do them at night. Sometimes I'll go upstairs and shut myself in my closet and do them so that I don't get mad at my kids. But they're powerful ways to clear your head and to change and shift your perspective, which is so needed when our brains get cluttered and overwhelmed. This is an interesting one that I wouldn't have thought of, but it might work for some of you, is keeping a pad of paper and a pen, especially a lit pen, so you don't have to turn on any lights, by your bedside, and use them to just brain dump all worries. Sometimes just getting them out on paper and then putting them away. It gets them out of your brain and onto the paper, and then your brain is free to relax and sleep. If you wake up and can't go back to sleep, get out of bed, but go into another dark room. Don't turn on lights, don't watch TV, and don't do anything that challenges your mind. Just sit quietly, or take a bath, or do a calming activity, something that will, again, meditation, and then try to sleep again after 30 minutes. So sometimes when we toss and turn in bed, it can actually make us feel more anxious. So that's a technique to try if you're struggling with waking up in the middle of the night with lots of worries on your mind. Okay, so what is one change that you could make to your bedtime routine? Make sure to write it down if you haven't already. And then let's just talk for a second about the difference. We've kind of discussed this already, but there are different ways that you can address if you're struggling to get to sleep versus struggling to stay asleep. We've already talked a little bit about that, but here's some really specific things you can do during the day based on which problem it is. So think for just a second, which one of those is your bigger problem? And then let's address those. So if you're struggling to fall asleep, we're going to increase early morning sunlight. Okay. So again, that's all about your circadian rhythm. We're going to decrease light at night, especially screens. So think like even a couple hours before you go to bed. Can you make adjustments in your house? Can you dim lights? Can you maybe have your bedside lamp on instead of your overhead lights? What can you do to kind of signal to your body that it's time to wind down and start to sleep? Physical activity in the afternoon, preferably outdoors. So first early morning sunlight, then in the afternoon. Shift your carbohydrates from evening to breakfast, because that's going to change the way your digestion works throughout the day and can affect your sleep. And then warming your skin at bedtime can really help signal your body to kind of start to release those chemicals, melatonin, the kind of things that are going to calm your body to prepare it to sleep. And then do something, meditation or whatever you need to help your brain to mentally wind down. I wanted to, let's see here. I wanted to just show you this slide really quickly before we talk about sleep fragmentation, and then we're going to wrap up. I thought this was fascinating. Blue light at night, these are the effects that it has on your body. We know blue light at night can have negative effects, but I didn't know it was this detailed, right? So it increases your stress hormones. It can actually increase your blood pressure and your heart rate. Just looking at blue light, can you believe that? It increases your sympathetic tone, which in your body is what activates your fight or flight response, which is obviously the opposite of what we want at bedtime, right? Increases your alertness, and it actually, listen to this, decreases your melatonin levels, your natural melatonin levels in your body, which is the hormone that your body uses to signal your body to sleep. CBT is your core body temperature. So it actually increases your core body temperature, whereas when you sleep, generally you want your core body temperature to decrease. And that's something that your body automatically triggers on its own, but the blue light is fighting that, right? So go ahead and screenshot this if you want to look at it in more detail. We won't go through every piece of this slide, but I just wanted to comment on low daylight. I think this is such a fascinating one. So you're thinking about low daylight throughout your day. So if you are in the dark, you think about somebody that just sits in the dark all day and doesn't go outside and doesn't get fresh air and sunshine. It's not just because fresh air and sunshine are so good for your mind and body. It's also because it literally triggers these different effects in your brain. Okay, so CBT amplitude, I just wanted to touch on this. Core body temperature amplitude is the difference between your average core body temperature throughout the day and night and the highest that it gets. So the bigger the difference there, the better your circadian rhythm is working, because what it's showing is that it knows when to be at its peak and it knows when to drop down into sleep mode. And the more that amplitude kind of hits this neutral, like not going very far, that's where your body gets really confused. Like, when am I supposed to be asleep? When am I supposed to be awake? So the more sunshine you get during the day, in general, the better your body is going to be triggered to know when to sleep and to stay asleep, which is then going to have all these other positive health effects with getting the restorative sleep that you need. Okay, really quick, we're going to wrap up with sleep fragmentation. If your struggle is staying asleep at night, here are some things that you can do. Increasing mid to late afternoon sunlight. Now, I think that doesn't mean don't get the early morning sunlight as well, but early morning sunlight is going to help more with initiation. Mid to late afternoon is going to help more with sleep fragmentation, which again is the trouble staying asleep or waking up a lot during the night. And I think the reason for that is just what we talked about. The more your body is seeing sun during the day, the more it's going to know to stay asleep at night, right? Increasing that afternoon physical activity, increasing late afternoon hydration. I think that has to do with your core body temperature again. Avoid diuretic beverages, especially in the evening, like alcohol and caffeine. Diuretic meaning the way that it shifts the fluids in your bodies. Keeping your bedroom dark. And then, like we talked about, don't turn on lights when you wake up. Try to go into another dark, calming environment. Red toned night lights, not blue toned, because we just learned what blue toned night lights can do to our chemicals in our body. Allowing the temperature in your room to cool gradually at night. We love to have the windows open at night. We even do it when it's really cold outside. A lot of times we just add more quilts to our bed, but that natural breeze can be really calming and relaxing, plus cool down the room to help you get restful sleep. And then CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, not core body temperature, a different CBT for sleep anxiety. So again, I think back to the slide that we had at the beginning, sometimes it can be really distressing if you're having trouble staying asleep. We get into bed at night and we have anxiety about going to sleep because we feel like it's going to be a miserable experience just waking up all night and not getting that restful sleep. So really training our brains to kind of let go of some of that anxiety that's probably fighting our ability to get good sleep is important. Okay, we're going to skip to the end here. We're not going to leave time for this because we're out of time, but just think about what we asked at the beginning. What was your biggest barrier to sleep? Did it change at all as we went through this? Did you change your mind at all? Were you surprised by any of this and think, "Oh, I have a problem with that and I didn't even realize it?" One thing I want to touch on as we close is sometimes we get stuck. And sometimes we can implement some of these great habits, and that can be all that we need. And sometimes we're just stuck in a cycle, right? Maybe your anxiety is causing you not to sleep, and then your sleep is increasing your anxiety, and then that anxiety is causing you not to sleep, and we're stuck in this cycle. Same thing with weight, right? I can't lose weight effectively if I'm not sleeping, but my weight is so high that I'm not sleeping well. There are things that we can do to break that cycle temporarily to get you headed in the right direction. And again, as you lose this weight and as you improve your health and as you change your lifestyle, you're more physically active and you're eating the right kinds of foods, all of those things are going to improve your sleep. But maybe you need help getting the sleep so that you can make those changes in the first place. And that's why you're working with a physician. If we need to get testing for you, if we need to remove some of these health barriers, even mental health barriers temporarily, to get you the sleep you need to be able to keep going with your trajectory, your forward trajectory, we can do that for you. So please don't hesitate to reach out and ask if you need that from us. Um, Here's a few resources. I know I threw a lot of facts at you tonight, so if you want to screenshot that and reference any of these sources that I kind of covered tonight, then that's great. And thank you for sticking with me so long. I know this was a content heavy night and a long one, but I hope that you learned something valuable, and I hope that now you will go and get some great sleep tonight. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.